Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today. I'm joined with Budi Arif from the University of Kent, and I'm Leslie Longstreet, the Global Director of Outreach and Partner Engagement from the Cyber Readiness Institute. We are based in New York or the US, and we have a very global mission of educating small and medium-sized enterprises on cybersecurity. And Budi, if you'd like to give a little bit of your background as well, you're welcome to.
Sure. Quick blurb. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Kent in Canterbury, that's in United Kingdom. I work in cybersecurity in general, and I'm interested in cybercrime and also various aspects of security, including technical aspect in IoT, Internet of Things. But in today's presentation, I'll focus on one of my research areas, which is on ransomware.
Thank you very much. So we will just dive right in, and I will start with just an overview of the current cybersecurity environment and risks, and then go through a little bit about what CRI does, and then I'll turn it over to Budi for the extremely interesting things that he covers. So just a couple of facts here. Brian Moynihan from Bank of America said that 80% of businesses have less than 10 employees and 95% have less than 100 employees. That really just is a stat that says that there are a lot of small businesses out there and medium-sized businesses out there that make up the supply chain for larger businesses. And that's why it's absolutely critical to have cybersecurity all across the board. According to the SBA, every hour another small business is closing during the pandemic. Hopefully we are on the upswing and getting out of this, but it's still a major risk because there's so many people that are having to work from home or partially in the office, partially outside of the office in the hybrid work environment. So fingers crossed, small businesses are able to make it through all of this. 67% of SMBs fail to survive a cyber breach. Again, many small businesses and medium-sized businesses don't have the revenue to withstand going through and dealing with a cyber breach after it happens. If they get breached and they lose their customer base due to trust, then they're just kind of out of luck. And then another stat is 56% of organizations suffered a breach caused by a third party. This is really critical, especially with all of the recent events that have gone on with SolarWinds and the Outlook or the Microsoft breach as well. If you have any third party within your organization or you're working with anyone else, you're automatically at risk of whatever their security is as well. So just be aware of that and make sure you're putting policies in place when you're working with those third parties. And then 3.92 million is the average cost of a data breach. That is not specific to small and medium-sized enterprises or businesses. That is just a general stat for larger businesses as well. So just a little bit of background on the Cyber Readiness Institute. We were formed by a group of senior leaders from global companies that were focused on securing their value chain. They were part of the Obama administration. It was a commission that was meant to help the Obama administration come up with cyber regulations and directions. And some of the members from that organization came out and decided to form the Cyber Readiness Institute to help really focus on small and medium-sized businesses that were not getting the resources that they needed from the larger companies that were out there already. So our goal is to share cybersecurity best practices and resources for free with small and medium-sized enterprises. And it's really great because we have these awesome partners, Principal, ExxonMobil, GM, Microsoft, MasterCard, and the Global Center for Global Enterprise that all help us develop these this content and distribute it as well. And our content focuses on core 4 issues: authentication, passwords, patching, software updates, phishing, don't click on those email links, and USB and removable media use. Our program as a whole, like our flagship program, is called the Cyber Readiness Program, and it covers all 4 of these issues and gives you practical and preventative measures to help protect your company and make it more cyber secure. Again, here are the 4 core issues. 99% of account compromise attacks can be prevented by multi-factor authentication or 2-factor authentication. It just adds an extra layer of protection, and it's really a great step to help keep your passwords a little bit more secure, even if someone does happen to brute force or guess your password if it happens to be a little on the weaker side. 17% of people use their favorite sports team in the current year as their password. So like, let's say you're from New York and someone goes on your LinkedIn and sees that. They're like, oh, you might like the New York Yankees, and it happens to be year 2021. So they try a couple different combinations of Yankees and 2021, and they may or may not eventually guess your password, but there's a very solid possibility of that. Software updates. 60% of breaches in 2019 were linked to a vulnerability where a patch was available but not applied. I'm sure most of you remember the WannaCry ransomware a few years ago. That was a Windows 10 vulnerability that a patch was released for, and many companies did not apply that patch. Booty can probably go into a little bit more detail about that and correct me if I was wrong there, but
yeah, that was 2017.
Huh?
Sorry, that was 2017.
Yeah, feels like yesterday. And then 91% of all cyber attacks start with phishing email. That is insane. Phishing emails are so sophisticated now. Hackers are really good at making lookalike emails that look just like your bank or your Facebook or anything along those lines. So just in general, don't click on links. If you get an email randomly telling you to go change your bank account password when you didn't request that, just go directly to your bank and change that password anyway, but not through the link. 81% of companies that fell for phishing attacks lost customers. That makes sense. If you're losing customer data and you're not helping keep that data protected, people are going to lose faith in you and not want to give you their business. And then for USB use, 8 out of 10 employees use non-encrypted USB devices, such as USB devices from conferences, or I don't know, just free ones that you get out and about, or they'll take their device or their USB and plug it from your computer into another one. Generally try to keep USB as one direction use. If you never know what's in somebody else's computer that could get downloaded onto your USB, and it's a really easy way to transfer malware. And here is just a fun pandemic style meme, and I will go into what is a ransomware attack. It is conducted by a malicious actor to hold an organization's data hostage for ransom. They can gain access through all of those core 4 issues that I talked about before: phishing, unpatched software, visiting malicious or compromised websites, and basically these ransomware attacks generally will lock down your computer and make you pay a ransom to unlock your data. But I will pause here and turn over to Booty to go into a lot more detail around ransomware and what that means for you and your company.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. I don't know if I have control to move forward, or I just need to tell you to go
You
next.
can just let me know.
All right, in that case, next, please. Okay, so I'll just give a quick blurb about who we are first. at the University of Kent is one of the 19 academic centers of excellence in cybersecurity research. We are recognized in the UK for our research, security research, and also we do research not just in pure technical aspect of security, but we also look at human aspect of security. Within the University of Kent, we are one of the 2 super centers, the other being biotechnology, another very important sector in the current world climate. But our super center, the one that we do on cybercrime, focus on a broad range of cybersecurity related research, but also we look at education. My role in this ICSS, Institute of Cybersecurity for Society, the name suggests the involvement of society here, is as innovation lead. So I would like to promote potential collaboration as well. So we do collaboration through Cyber Invest. This is one of the funding scheme in the UK, for example, or various technology transfer, incubators and accelerators, and also other industry collaborations. If you'd like to find out more, next please, Leslie. We have a website, so have a look at this website. We have information about what kind of work we do, who we are, our separate research. We have quite a diverse research interest, so hopefully that's something that could be of value to collaborate with you as well. And most importantly, we also do education. So this is perhaps something that we can share with everyone here in due course. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much about this. So if you're interested, by all means, please have a look on the website. Okay, yes, previous one. Yes, thank you. So Leslie already started with a bit of an introduction on ransomware, but ransomware is actually quite subtle. It's quite a lot of variety in ransomware. In general, ransomware is a type of bad software or malware that prevents victims from accessing their data. So in general, it could be either by locking out the victim from the system. So this could be just a screen locker. So the data themselves are not encrypted. So they just lock out the victim from using the computer. That's a bit easier to solve. You can just boot with a clean USB, for example, or clean CD, and then you can still have access to your data. But the one that's a bit harder to recover from, unless you have the backup, is by encrypting your files, sometimes your data files, or even the whole system. And that requires a key to be able to decrypt your data back. This is the most common type of ransomware, but there are different variants. There are other subtle variants as well, like scareware. There are some that scaring you into paying ransom, but actually they're not doing anything. There are also what is called wiperware, like NotPetya, which actually pretends to be ransomware, but they actually do not will not recover your data whatsoever. They just want to destroy your data. So that's also other subtle variants. But one of the typical or the most common characteristic of ransomware is that there is a demand. There is a ransom note that will be displayed to the attacker. So typically they will contain information about maybe the identity. Some of them tell them what the name of the ransomware is. They might give you instruction on how to pay the ransom. Ransomware operation has become more like a business. So the operator wants to make sure that people can pay them. So they even provide a helpline for their victims to buy cryptocurrency, for example, and how to make payment. So this is becoming a kind of lucrative market for cyber criminals. They even provide multi-language support for the victims. So it might be a same ransomware variant, but it has the notes in English, maybe in German, in Chinese, or whatever languages they feel the victims are residing in. Some other ransomware has got extra pressure, such as countdown timer. So if you don't pay within 3 days, for example, they will increase the ransom demand. And if you don't pay after 3 more days, they will wipe out all your data. So this is one of the ploys that the ransomware operators use in order to exert their victims to pay. Actually, we do a bit of research on different types of splash screen. If you're interested, you can find one of our papers. I'll give you the link later in the slides. Okay, next please, Leslie. Okay, this is an example of what a screenshot may look like. This is a famous WannaCry that happened in 2017. It was big because there were so many unpatched systems that were vulnerable to SMB attack, this eternal blue vulnerability that certain government agency found, but somehow was exploited by the ransomware operator. This one was not targeted. In a sense, they just spread like wildfire because it just uncontrolled, because the vulnerabilities found in the network made the ransomware spread quite easily among the network, within the network. In particular, in the UK, the National Health Service, the NHS, was badly affected, and it caused a lot of surgery and medical procedure had to be cancelled or postponed because of the computer being compromised by this. But there are many other variants. So I'm not going to talk about the variants, but I will give a little hint about the timeline as well, which will be in the next slide, please. Okay, so this is an image or diagram I borrowed from this website, which perhaps gives a bit of illustration how ransomware has evolved through the years. It could be argued that the first time ransomware was detected was as early as 1989 with Dr. Pop 8's Trojan, which was spread to participants at the World Health Organization conference, and someone circulated a floppy disk that if the victim put on the computer, it would do a bit of counting, and when it hits 90 or something of reboots, it will encrypt, or it will kind of prevent access to your data. And back then, the way of paying was by sending money to a post box in Panama. So it's not exactly very practical way of doing cryptocurrency by doing payment to the ransom. All of that changed in around 2009, 2008, when cryptocurrency became a bit more common. The rise of Bitcoin, for example, made it more practical and business-like for cyber criminals to actually make the most of the ransomware features. And you can see that the explosion of ransomware varieties started around 2011. There are so many different variants now, it's quite hard to keep track of how many variants there are. And they have different types of sectors being affected. For example, in when was that? January 2020 or late 2019, Sotinokibi ransomware hit TravelX. So this is currency exchange company that often resides in airports and various other places where if you want to travel, you want to exchange your money. So they got hits that affected a lot of travelers, obviously. And I think TravelX went into administration because of the situation they got in after, as a consequence of that. So next, please. Okay, there are some trends with ransomware. In the last few years, we noticed some changes in the strategy that the operators use. In the beginning, it was the approach more like spray and pray. They just run the ransomware, hopefully hitting many potential victims, and some of them may then in the end pay up to get their data back, to pay the ransom demand. But these days, quite a lot of the ransomware are targeting certain companies, big companies. This proves to be more lucrative because it's more likely that big companies have money to pay. They might even have insurance, cyber insurance, that is prepared to pay for ransom demand. So this becomes a more popular kind of methods of operandi of the attackers. Another growing threat is that they're not just encrypting your data to prevent you from accessing your data, but they also steal your data. They exfiltrate your data with the threat of revealing your data instead of just keeping you from accessing your data. They might still encrypt your data, so they might have a double-edged hybrid kind of attack. So it becomes an attack both on your availability. If the file is encrypted, you cannot access it, so it's an attack of availability of your system. Or it could also be a threat to your confidentiality, how your privacy of your data could be affected. And there are some more advanced types of ransomware variants that try to corrupt the backup systems too. So we know that, and we like to preach this all the time, that backup is the best, or one of the best preventive methods to make sure that you can still get your data back even if your computer is encrypted. But some ransomware, advanced ransomware variants are trying to be quite, quiet in the beginning and try to bring the corruption of their attack into your backup systems too. So this is one of the growing threats. Next, please. We are not sitting idle. We try to combat ransomware. We try various other various technical means to actually fight ransomware attacks. For example, we look at ways of detecting and identification of ransomware sooner. This could be, for example, by some analysis of the behavior of the software in your computer. And if you detect some anomaly, you might be able to then protect your computer from being encrypted. Another method of combating ransomware is by protection by copying files. So when a file writing operation is to be performed, it could be directed to a different file, or a copy was made automatically for you, so that if it turned out to be a ransomware, then you still have your file as a backup somewhere else automatically for you. It's also be possible to get some protection by extracting the keys. Remember that with ransomware, with encrypting your file, typically there is a key to decrypt it back. Now, the ransomware operator wants to sell this key back to you so that you can get your data back. If you have a protecting system to extract the key automatically while the ransomware is happening, because sometimes the key itself will be generated on the computer in the fly, so it could be stored in the memory. By being able to extract the key from the memory, you then don't need to pay the ransomware operator because you actually have the key, so you can decrypt your files yourself. And another popular way of combating ransomware is creating decryption tools. There are quite a few of tools available out there to be able to recover. Some of these were provided by cybersecurity companies like Avast, MCSoft, McAfee, etc. And they provide these decryption tools for victims to be able to recover their files. It's not always successful. There are some that would work better than others. We're actually in the middle of writing a paper. We submitted a paper that looks into different success rates of different decryption tools. Once it's published, hopefully you can find them. Hopefully, well, if it's published, we'll see what will happen. But I would like to point you to a worthwhile project that's called No More Ransom project. This is set up by the Netherlands police with the help of several software companies, including the ones mentioned here. And you can go to the website nomoreransom.org, and in there they have tools to be able to help victims to be able to recover their files if they had become a victim of ransomware. Next, please. But in this particular talk, I hope we have a bit of time. I'll try to go a bit quicker so that we have a bit of time for discussion at the end as well. I want to show some example of the work we do in ransomware. In this particular work, it's based on a paper that we published in 2019. The link I will provide at the end of, or a bit later in the slides. We look at ransomware deployments. So we look at the technical aspect of ransomware deployment, for example, by understanding what kind of operations is being done on your computer, what kind of processes are running that could indicate potential suspicious activity of ransomware. But we also look at what happened to the victims, potential victims who may have been hit by ransomware. How did they detect there was a ransomware in the system, and what did they do? For that, this is the human responses part of our study, and this was done by conducting a survey that was done in March to July 2017, so it was quite a while back. But nonetheless, the findings or the insights still relevant. And we also combined that with some follow-up interviews with 8 participants who were willing to be interviewed further. Next, please. So what are the findings we had from our research? So these are some of the common infection factors. This is in agreement with what Leslie said earlier. Phishing and social engineering is still one of the most popular way of getting ransomware to the victim's computer. So this could be over email. There might be some links or attachment in the email that encourage the victim to click or to install, and unwittingly that would put the ransomware to the victim computer. It's possible to have some exploit kits. Some of the ransomware operators have got various exploit kits to be able to install and spread their ransomware on the network. There are some downloaders. There are some websites, for example, that have been compromised, and if you happen to go to that website, it will try to install the ransomware on your computers, and that will be another way of getting the ransomware into the target systems. But another thing that we found from our research is a kind of model on ransomware deployment. We call it Randep, for short for ransomware deployment. And in this case, we create some sort of mapping properties of what kind of activities ransomware might do, and into the lower stage and the higher stage. In the higher stage, it's more abstract level, and the lower stage is a bit more concrete on what types of actions they actually do in the ransomware execution. Next, please, Leslie. So this, hopefully you can see the graph. Some of the bits are missing, but never mind. You can see the graph in more details in the paper if you're interested. But in general, on the higher level, there are three types of stages that the ransomware might go through. The first part is the stealthy operation. So naturally, in the beginning, the ransomware wants to remain undetected. It wants to be as discreet as possible so that the computer or the owner of the computer will not detect that there are some activities that are potentially malicious. But this is essentially preparing the groundwork for the attack itself. So some of the actions that were done in there, which is the lower stage kind of characteristics, is fingerprinting. So the ransomware will scan the computer, the target that it has got hold of, and it will try to see what operating systems is there, what kind of potential vulnerabilities might be there, so that they can install it. It can also look at how to propagate in the network. So this might look at vulnerabilities in the operating system to see if they can spread to other computers or devices within the same network. This is one example of, this is the example, WannaCry, for example, has a propagation through unpatched vulnerabilities in Samba. And then there's also the command and control. There's a communication between the ransomware installation to the ransomware operator. So this allows to report back, for example, to the ransomware operator, and to receive command. Maybe it starts doing the encryption, maybe it starts doing the threats, etc. So this is the way of getting some sort of command and control. And another action that might be done in the stealthy part is to map your device. So in this case, the ransomware will start scanning for your computer to look at what are potential valuable things in there. So maybe there are some documents that are valuable to be either exfiltrated or encrypted. Maybe your photos, maybe your secret documents, maybe some companies have got classified information that could be beneficial for rivals. So these are the mapping stage that is done by the ransomware. And the next stage is on suspicious activities. So in this case, the ransomware will start doing the bad things. So it could be start encrypting the files or locking the system out from the user. And then obviously the last stage is on the obvious stage. And in this case, the files may be started to be deleted, or it might show the threat itself as a kind of ultimate aim of the ransomware is to show the ransom demand so that the victims can then pay the ransom demand. So that's obviously will need to have clear signing to the victims so that they can follow the instruction to pay. Not all ransomware variants will have all of these actions, so there are varieties in that. But the most obvious actions will be more or less the same. There's the ransom notes, and then there is going to be files missing or inaccessible. Next, please. Leslie. All right. Okay. So what did we learn from our user survey? So we look at one of the aspects that we look at was the operating systems infected. So the majority that were infected were Windows operating system. In this case, Windows 7 has been one of the kind of most common targets of ransomware infection, but it's not exclusive to just Windows. There are quite a few other operating systems. For example, Mac, Apple. We often gloat that Mac is more safe, more secure from being infected of various malware. But okay, maybe to some extent that's true, but it's also not completely immune. So it's possible to have different operating systems. There's a trend to infect mobile devices, so Android or even iOS. There's also potential targets of this. Next, please. Thank you. So one of the questions we wanted to know is whether the victims or the participants of our survey knew how ransomware got into the network. And the majority here, as shown in the dark red pie segment there, 35% of the participants said that it was due to opening an attachment in email. So yes, email is still quite, we have to be careful when we are dealing with emails. And as a second most popular is clicking a link in email. So that's, again, the vector through email is one of the popular ways for the attackers. Not a lot of, well, some people did not know how the ransomware got into their system, so they couldn't say much on that. But a few others were by clicking a website or exploiting some vulnerable parts of the systems, like software vulnerabilities. Next, please. So what were the attachment types? This is quite small samples, but quite a few of the survey respondents say that this was some doc Word file extension that was mimicking, well, doc files that were actually ransomware. So this could be the attachment types that caused them to install unwittingly the ransomware into their system. Next, please. And what was the effect of the attack? Well, the majority claimed that the files got encrypted. So 27 in this case got that as the kind of aftermath of the attack. Some people reported that screens got blocked, so they could not get back to your system. They got locked out of the system. And a few others that are a bit more specific, like the master boot records or master file tables being affected or corrupted, and they cannot even reboot the system as a consequence. Next, please. We would like to know as well whether the participants of the survey managed to recover their files. So majority managed to recover their files. So 76%, so the 33 people in the list managed to recover their files one way or another. But 10, so 23% roughly, did not manage to recover at all. Sometimes you just give up, and maybe you just feel like, okay, I don't have anything that's particularly valuable in that computer, so I don't mind. I'll just restart, refresh everything, reinstall everything from scratch again. So that could be the case for some of them. Next, please. And out of those who managed to recover their data, we were curious, and how did they get the data back? So majority here, about 70%, managed to recover their data from backup. This is illustrating the importance of good backup systems, so that you can actually recover your files, your data, without having to pay the ransom demand. Some of them have got others, or they didn't specify what types of action they did in order to recover. Some people contacted some authorities trying to reverse engineer the software, or maybe using tools that are available out there. But I think about 1 out of these participants, 3%, actually paid the ransom demand. So sometimes it's not, well, there are no other ways. And if you're really, really desperate to get your files back, I know some people would just be willing to pay the ransom demand to get it over with and get the files back. This is not something I would recommend, to be honest. We'll see the reason a bit later in the slides. Next, please. So these are some of the first signs of infection. The most obvious is that the desktop computer is being locked, so it cannot get back to their accessing the files as normal, or accessing the functionality of the Windows like normal. Some files went missing because they got encrypted, for example. They cannot access them again. They cannot open them. There are quite a few others, operations that were taking longer than usual. Some of the computers crash, and obviously that's the initial telltale signs. But at the end of the day, they will know for sure that they've been hit by a ransomware when they see the ransom notes. Okay, so next, please. So what do we learn from all this? Okay, so the most common attack vector is via email, more specifically via email attachments. So this is something that we cannot emphasize more. Be careful with your emails. So we need to follow some basic security hygiene. So doing backup, be careful with links, do the software updates, install protection software, and importantly, don't run everyday operations with admin privileges by default. So it's often quite tempting to just run, when you log into your computer, use the same login that also have admin privileges so that you can install new apps or new software. But that's not a good thing, because if the attacker managed to get in using that credentials, then they have everything. They can install their ransomware or malware or whatever they want. So that becomes easily compromised. And in that case, try to separate access privileges. Next, please. Okay, so what can we learn? So it's a bit of a quick tour here. I hope there are some interesting information in here. So what we do, what kind of summary we can have out of this? Prevention is better than remedy. So this is why we need to be prepared. We need to be ready, in a sense, so that if an attack happens, we are not compromised too badly, and then we can recover quite quickly. Educating users and implementing endpoint securities are very important aspect as well, so that we can prevent the human element from being exploited, but also we have created a technical solution that the human can then use and help them to deal with the threats. I would recommend not to pay the ransom demand. There are two main reasons for not paying the ransom demand. First, there is no guarantee that you would get your data back. Okay, we are dealing with criminals here. We don't know what they will do. So it's yeah, we don't know if they will actually keep their promises of giving you the key so that you can get your data back. Secondly, and it's actually very important, is that by paying the ransom demand, you could actually be funding cybercrime operations, because the cybercrime operators are becoming quite emboldened in their work. Okay, they get money out of this, so they want to keep doing this. So that's not a good idea. I want to just give a quick example of repeat victimization of ransomware as well. I think a few months ago, maybe last year, there was a big company in the UK. I don't know the full name, but it was in the news by a few months ago. It was infected. The company was infected by ransomware, and it decided to pay the ransom demand in millions. But they forgot to actually secure the system, so that 2 weeks after they pay the ransom demand, they got hit by the same ransomware, by the same operators, and they got, the same ransom demand again. So they have to pay twice for the same vulnerability. So that's obviously a very damaging and very bad operation of that company. So I would like to encourage people not to become one of those victims. Okay, next, please. Oh yes, so this is my last slide. If you'd like to read more about the paper, it's available online. There's a link available there. I assure you the link is legit. It's not a ransomware operation distribution. This is the link that is the publisher of the paper actually has. You'd be assured that it's a safe link. Okay, so you can click on that. You can download the PDF to read the paper if you're interested in that. And you can also find my website there. You can find the list of papers that we have. And if you have any question, feel free to email me as well. That's a contact email there. Thank you. Back to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Booty. That was very informative. So I'm just going to run through these next couple of slides pretty quickly because I know we have quite a few questions and I want to make sure we have some time at the end to answer them. But as Booty mentioned, prevention is absolutely key for ransomware. If you guys are interested, I'm just going to kind of pop through this real quick. We have some resources on the CRI website that kind of walk you through how to deal with a ransomware attack and how to prepare for that. But basically create backups, test your backups, patch your software, have phishing training, and have a plan. And then if for some reason you are infected with ransomware, remove that infected device. If you have tested backups, no problem. Don't pay the ransom, just reinstall that backup. And then without tested backups, there's some other steps that you could take here. And then for recovery, reset everything, do a clean install, update all software, restore data, and then just make sure in the future all of your software is updated. And then, as I mentioned, we have a ransomware playbook on the CRI website. Either go to becyberready.com or cyberreadinessinstitute.org. Both of those are available there, and you can find it on our site. But I would like to go ahead and hop to the Q&A portion because I know that we had quite a few interesting questions. Booty, I think the first one will go to you.
Okay.
And that was, with the advance of ransomware as a service, are the variants polymorphic or are the new variants truly innovative? For example, how many truly new species are in the research you guys complete?
Okay, thanks for the question, Peter. It's a very, pertinent question. Ransomware as a service is actually another of the growing concerns here. So the idea here that there are some ransomware families or strains which actually operate as almost like syndicates or almost like a pyramid scheme, in a sense that they will provide the ransomware kits for wannabe ransomware operators to purchase or to get into the scheme, and then there's some cuts that will be given to the ransomware owner in the sense that people pay some sort of franchise fees to them once the ransomware operator gets paid by the victims from the victims. Now, in order to answer your actual question here, to be honest, I don't have the full details at the moment to know the exact description of the new and growing ransomware threats. There are some new variants that are more advanced in a way that they are more crafty in evading detection. They also, in a sense, new species because they operate in different domains as well. There are some potential threats of operation in Internet of Things devices, the threat of encrypting industrial control systems. These are growing threats that's potentially as part of the new ransomware campaign that are still always evolving. Okay, so I don't know if that's kind of answers some of the questions that Peter has.
Okay. And then the next question, also a few comments from Gary, but I think that the main question is, what are some consequences to hacking? Are there active measures to identify and prosecute the hackers? For example, infiltrating these communities, international agreements for prosecution, so on and so forth.
Yes, the law enforcement agency is trying their best to do that as well. So there are not many high profile arrests, for example. There have been some cases of ransomware operators being arrested, but they typically are not the big players. But at the same time, there are some ransomware operators that decided to call it a day. They call it quits because of the risk they might be facing of being arrested or being prosecuted. So some of them just close shop, they release all the keys, they even release the source code so that anyone could potentially recover from their own ransomware. So there are some, I would say, maybe glimmer of hope that some of the operators are becoming quite concerned that this is potentially risky and they might actually be arrested or captured. So they will stop, and hopefully that means the less or fewer number of attacks happening.
Okay. And then we have a question from Peter. Are there more attacks on Windows because it's more vulnerable, or because there are more Windows installs than other operating systems?
I guess it's both. There are more Windows operating system computers out there than Macs or Linux. But also there are potential vulnerabilities in Windows. It's been known, anecdotally, that Windows is less secure, but there's been known that there are some vulnerabilities, like in SMB, Samba. There is I think it's still ongoing, RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, that is used by Windows. There are some vulnerabilities in that protocol as well that have been exploited by some of the ransomware, the most recent ransomware variants. So yes, I think it's both. Okay.
And then we have another question from Lena. Newly emerged ransomware is successful at exfiltrating data. It really interests me how hackers can move such big volumes of data without being noticed. What should organizations do to prevent this from happening?
Yes, some of the operations that they use here will be similar to espionage in a sense. Interestingly, I did some work in the past on insider threats. So people who are within the organizations who are allowed to access the data within there, but they might actually be compromised by either blackmail or lure of money to actually exfiltrate the data to sell to a third party. So they might, for example, start copying files to USB stick or send it over the internet to some other places. So some of the protection that we can put in place here is similar to data loss prevention techniques. So being able to detect that there are some fast amount of copying being done is one of the most obvious ways of detecting that. But another way that could be very useful in terms of protecting your data is to make sure your own data is also encrypted by yourself and you have the key, so that if someone who tries to get into your data found it's actually encrypted, they cannot get the actual data within that without the key. So that will prevent yourself being a victim of compromise in confidentiality.
Great. And then we have two additional questions, one from Craig. Statistically, how far ahead of the security fixes are the bad actors?
It's difficult to answer that because it's always a game of cat and mouse here. As a security researchers, we try to find vulnerabilities before they get exploited by the bad guys. But the bad guys are not sitting idle. In the past, we could take comfort that the bad guys are not keen on reading academic papers, but I think we cannot completely ignore that now. So some of the bad guys are learning quite a lot in terms of advanced technologies and ways of doing the attack more successfully. So we are still catching up in that. We're not very efficient yet in terms of fighting cybercrime. Sometimes the cost of creating protection is more than the damage that could be caused. Okay, that's by the by, but it's a challenge. What we can do is to do our best to find the vulnerabilities before the bad guys. This is because the cybercrime or the cyber warfare, in a sense, is quite asymmetrical. For the good guys, for the defenders, we have to protect or find so many potential vulnerabilities or holes so that we can patch them all. Whereas the bad guys, they just need to find one hole that they can exploit, and then they're in, and then they can do a lot of damage. So it's the asymmetry of the war here makes it quite challenging in a sense for our security researchers.
Great. We have another question around tools and best practices. Nalan wants to know your thoughts on how to design some tools to mitigate the impact that is caused by ransomware based on the findings that you've found in your study.
Okay, I think some of the tools that could be useful are early detection tools. So maybe some anomaly detection to check if there are some potential suspicious activities happening in your network or in your computers, so that it could be shut down quickly before it caused too much damage. So it's in a sense containment, some sort of damage containment, and then actions to remedy that would be very appropriate. Other than that, there are many tools available post-mortem. So if you're unlucky and you actually got compromised, there are some tools I mentioned through the No More Ransom project, for example, that you can use. Most of these tools are provided free of charge to help you recover your data. So make use of them if you can. One of the challenges that victims may face here is that they may not know what kind of ransomware variants has hit their computer. So No More Ransom has got a tool called Crypto Sheriff. Basically, by describing the ransomware infection to the system, it will suggest to you that, okay, you've been hit by Dharma ransomware, for example, and then here's the steps that you can do to recover. So they have some way of automating that. The tool itself is good, but it's not perfect. There are still some limitations. So there are some ways of improving that. So we just have to keep improving our research and try to give the best solution out there for everyone to use.
Thank you. I think that is all the questions.
Okay.
So I will just move on to the next slide, which is a thank you slide. Thank you everyone for joining today. And Budi, thank you so much for your expertise and for answering all of these really interesting questions. Again, for anybody who is interested in learning more about the CRI materials, you can either visit becyberready.com or the cyberreadinessinstitute.org. And then Budi also has his research and all of his papers listed on 2 slides ago on this PowerPoint. And this will all get sent out to everyone in the next day or so, along with a recording for this webinar. Thank you all for joining, and keep an eye out and let us know if you have any feedback or questions, or even if you have any ideas for webinars in the future, specifically related to ransomware and small and medium-sized businesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions as well. Hope that was informative. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.